All right, welcome back for part 4 of academic inclusion. Now, I want to give you a heads up. We're going to watch 3 videos. And what I want you to do for question number 9 on your document is that I want you to write for each one of them, and you can label video 1, video 2, and video 3. That would all fall under number 9, is what are your takeaways from the videos? So, for example, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Was there anything surprising? And I do also want to let you know that this is coming from uh, a grant-funded program called STEAMY, which is Innovation for Inclusion in Early Education. That's where this video comes from. All right, so again, after each video, stop and just write down, quick write, about what your takeaways are. The first video we're going to watch is called Let's Change Attitudes and Beliefs About Inclusion. Okay, and here we go.
What does the literature tell us about high-quality inclusion? We know from hundreds of studies now, with investments from all levels of government, federal, state, and local, that high-quality inclusive settings are the only environments with consistent data supporting children's superior learning. And there are a few, but very compelling and convincing studies indicating that some non-inclusive environments could actually be developmentally harmful for children's learning. We know from efficacy research that when high-quality inclusion is present, it benefits a wide variety of children with developmental disabilities, children with developmental delays, mild to severe, children with autism spectrum disorder, children with multiple disabilities, children with significant social emotional needs, children with limited mobility, and children who are deaf or hard of hearing have all benefited from high-quality inclusion. So given all the data, why aren't we moving the needle on inclusion? Why is it that after the last 40 years, there's essentially no improvement in the percentage of children with disabilities being included in regular early childhood settings? It's not a lack of research, a lack of resources, or a lack of professional training. It's attitudes and beliefs. And what are they? First, it's the difference between people who are optimistic and people who are pessimistic about the capabilities of individuals with disabilities. Second, it's the contrast between ensuring that everyone belongs versus permitting membership only when a particular behavioral expectation is met. Some of these common expectations that you might have heard before are children need to be toilet trained, they need to be able to walk into the building, or they need to be able to communicate in a specific way. And the third attitude and belief that drives the lack of progress is pretty simple. Inclusion is really hard work. Though it is hard work, everyone loses when individuals with disabilities are not included.
All right, so that is our first video. What I want you to do is to stop and just write down what your takeaways for that video number 1 are, and then come back. All right, welcome back. The next one we're going to watch is on the key characteristics of high quality inclusive education. All right, and again, after this, I want you to write down your takeaways.
What are the key characteristics of high quality inclusive education? First, inclusive settings use evidence based practices more frequently. We know high quality inclusive programs integrate a variety of evidence based practices to individualize instruction to each and every child. The Council for Exceptional Children's Division for Early Childhood's recommended practices are resources to help create high quality inclusion. They are comprehensive and sufficiently backed by evidence to address all developmental domains for all children. What's more, high quality inclusive settings tend to be associated with organizational structures that provide more professional development to drive high fidelity implementation of these evidence based practices. Second, we know high quality inclusion is focused on data based decision making. Curricula, materials, and activities are modified based on data collected by members of the child's IEP or IFSP team. Teams in high quality inclusive settings collect and use data to inform their decisions. Third, high quality inclusion is not driven by a single team member. It's not driven by only the occupational therapist, physical therapist, or speech therapist. Because inclusion is about transdisciplinary service delivery. This means everybody on the team, including the family and teachers, plans together, delivers together, and collaborates on goals and objectives of the IEP and the IFSP. When transdisciplinary teaming happens, instructional generalization opportunities for kids are maximized. That means children with speech needs get speech therapy from every adult that they come in contact with, regardless of the professional background of those adults. It means IEP and IFSP goals are worked on every day, all day. And it maximizes consistency in positive adult child interactions, which is absolutely essential for reducing challenging behavior. Furthermore, transdisciplinary teams in high quality inclusive settings tend to write more functional IEP and IFSP objectives. A fourth aspect we know about high quality inclusion is that inclusive environments are comprehensible by children. That is to say, while there is great imagination, novelty, and diversity from day to day that children love and thrive on, there are also consistent environmental elements that children can count on. For example, their daily schedule doesn't vary. A fifth characteristic we know about high quality inclusion is the importance of the full utilization of peer influence. Peers can and should play a fundamental role in the lives of children with disabilities. In high quality inclusive settings, there are proportionately more typically developing peers than children with disabilities. This allows for more opportunities to generalize skills in a peer social domain. Adults and caregivers need to support the development of those relationships because we know that the most powerful intervention agent for young children developing peer-related social skills is not an adult, it's a peer. Further data indicate challenging behavior can be minimized with less peer buddy burnout in a setting with more typically developing peers who also benefit from inclusive environments. All of these elements of high-quality inclusive programs are not things that you add up. They are part of a multiplicative equation. When any one element of a multiplication equation equals 0, the outcome is 0. Similarly, when any one element of high-quality inclusion is missing, it is not a high-quality inclusive program. That's a high bar, but perhaps, scientifically speaking, it's an accurate bar. In summary, there is no doubt that high-quality inclusion benefits children both with and without disabilities. Children can develop to their fullest potential when they can fully participate alongside all of their peers. We also know that high-quality inclusive programs use evidence-based practices, data-based decision-making, transdisciplinary service delivery, consistent environmental elements, and peer support. And we know it is hard work to ensure all these elements are strong, which is why we've included resources that can help you on your journey to promoting and enhancing.
So again, I encourage you to check out STEMI because they have lots of resources related to inclusion. All right, so for as part of number 9, I want you to go ahead and write down your key takeaways from the key characteristics of a high quality inclusive education, and then come back for our next video.
What are the key
All right, welcome back. Now for our last video that you will be giving you'll be discussing or sharing your key takeaways for. This one is on social outcomes for inclusion. So now let's check out what social outcomes for inclusion may be.
What's the big deal about social outcomes and inclusion? Research over many years tells us that the most significant gains for children with disabilities who are in inclusive settings over comparable children in non-inclusive settings are seen within the peer social domain. But it's also true that large, statistically significant differences in communication, cognitive skills, and reductions in challenging behaviors favor children in inclusive settings. So what does this mean? States, school districts, and school boards are driven by a focus on literacy and early reading. But what about children's peer-related social skills? Children who have a friend when they are 3, 4, and 5 are on a totally different developmental path than children who do not have friends at those ages. Some of the outcomes improved by early friendships include improved academic skills, higher high school graduation rates, fewer special education services, longevity, and much more. And what about typically developing kids? Typically developing children also reap many benefits from learning and playing alongside their peers with disabilities. Typically developing children in inclusive settings have greater or equal cognitive and language skills, fewer challenging behaviors, and more advanced social skills than typically developing children in non-inclusive environments. And it is not surprising that children in inclusive settings have more accepting attitudes towards individuals with differences, which could have a large societal impact on the acceptance of individuals with disabilities in our communities.
All right. So now what I want you to do is to write down your takeaways from from video number 3, and then you come back and I'll share my takeaways with you, okay? See you in a second. All right, so my takeaways, I did the same thing. My takeaways from the short videos were one was realizing that it's not research, resources, or professional training that are the biggest inhibitors for inclusion. It's attitudes and beliefs. It's whether someone is optimistic or pessimistic. It's whether someone is strengths oriented or deficits oriented. And so that's really important to know. And it's really important if you are advocating for inclusion that you lead with the beliefs and the attitudes of supporting inclusion, of being a strengths based, an optimistic person when you are presenting those. Another takeaway thing I took away is what are some of the characteristics in addition to the ones that we talked about earlier of high quality inclusive education. Things like evidence-based practice, data-based decision making, having a transdisciplinary service delivery, having consistent environmental elements, and that is important for many of our students. But then again, you hear that peer support, how important that peer support is, and the benefits not only for students with disabilities, but also with students who do not have disabilities. And then finally, in the last video, when I looked at the outcomes, recognizing that when students are in inclusive settings, that they have improved academic skills, higher high school graduation rates, less need for special education services, and there's that longevity. So again, for me, those were takeaways that I had from the videos. And so I want to let you know of another resource in addition to STEMI is that the TIE Center, which again is from a grant from the Office of Special Education, has some resources on creating communities of belonging. And so they provide tools, they provide resources, they provide strategies that you can use to integrate your students with their non-disabled peers. And some of the things that they focus on, and I want you to think about how important these are in your life, is that some of the resources that they have focus on things like these are called the 10 dimensions of belonging, on things like being present, having people be present with you, being invited into things or to things, feeling welcomed. Think how, if you feel welcome, how that gives you a sense of belonging. Being known. Imagine that you go into someone's having a gathering and someone says hi and they call your name. What being known, how that adds to your sense of belonging. Being accepted, being involved. Now think about being involved versus not being involved and how that affects your sense of belonging. Being supported, being heard, being befriended, and being needed. That's an important thing for us. It is important for us to make sure that our students are needed and that we demonstrate that because all of these 10 dimensions are signs of and add to the quality of people's lives and their belonging. Now, again, think about the power of belonging. All right, I think I'm going to stop there and then we'll come back for part number 5 and we'll talk about peer supports. All right, I'll see you in the next video.